No, it is live. Shh, Amanda is still not here, but I thought I'd better go live anyways, get entropy set up, and have a little chatty poo regardless. It's true. No, she's not here yet, but she said she's just getting her computer set up. This is last I heard. And she sent some very frantic texts. So I know she was, whatever she was doing, she had a crisis or something, or, whatever. But she's trying to get set up now. Throws her off too if she wasn't prepared that it's going to be video. So I'm assuming she's doing something to get ready. And then we do this entropy nonsense. Start streaming. Oh, yes. Entropy. Which, I'm not sure. It doesn't yet do me any. I'm not sure. Oh, there's that. So, yeah, I assume, let's see, that she will be appearing. She's certainly trying to, and she certainly either forgot or something happened. So I thought I'd go live. And yeah, Amanda Milius. For those who don't know, I'm sure anyone who's watching this does know who she is. We're gonna, if I do get her, hopefully I'll talk to her about mostly her father, who in my mind is one of the greatest artists of the 20th century, of the second half of the 20th century, really. And not just for Conan, but for a lot of his stuff. So I have a lot of respect for John Milius, and so does she. And she's happy to talk about him instead of herself, so that's good. That's handy. I mean, not that I'm not interested in her story too, and I wouldn't ask her a few questions about that. But yes, bit of a rough start. Sorry about that, chickens. Hopefully it's not like that with Sarah Frisetta. It'll be imagine getting the double stab. The whole Crown weekend would be right down the tubes then. You'd just be, Anyways, I have, if something happens and she doesn't still show up, I might have a special guest for you who's equally as exciting in my mind, but perhaps not in yours. No, she must be trying to do it anyways. Hold on now. Oh, there she is. There she is. Add to stream. Oh, that's not working. Hello.
Hi. Okay,
how are you?
I'm good. Hold on. I feel like I'm not sitting in the right spot. Let me move this. We're doing this very on the fly because I got trapped in a car and I hate seeing myself in the mirror vision. Just tell me where you want me to be. Hi, friends.
Hello. Hello. Yeah, that's fine. Whatever you want to be between the ladies from whatever that barbarian show is there.
Oh, I have 2 new Frisettas. I can't believe that's not what's behind me. Did you already talk to Miss Frisetta?
No, that's Monday.
Do you want to see my new Frisettas?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, wait, hold on. Are we streaming live? Are we on?
Yeah. I went live just a couple minutes ago. So.
Are you sure? Okay, let me wait.
Yeah,
why do I keep falling out of? What is my problem? Why can't I just stay in the? Okay.
You look fine. You look good.
I know, but I just float. I can't understand the concept of a mirror. Hold on, I want to show you my new Frisettas. Hold on. Look at this. Look at this.
Oh my God.
Right?
It's a print. That's the classic.
That's the classic for the office. And then we have one more. This is because everything has to, that's the snake one. Can you see it? Oops.
Amazing.
That one's my favorite because everything has to be snake oriented with me because of the you know, the double-headed snake. So there's so many times where I wear like every piece of jewelry that I have that like really matters is in some way a snake of some kind. And people don't get it. They're like, there's like people at like these like conservative conferences and stuff where they're just like, she's wearing like skull rings and like snakes with diamonds and like blah 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 and rubies. And I'm like, clearly you haven't seen Conan the Barbarian, because that's actually my guiding philosophy. And like, I live by the rule of Valeria. Do you want to live forever?
Yeah, they don't understand true conservatism, which has nothing to do with their, you know.
Well, and they don't understand,
they don't understand
that view of women, which is like the most accurate thing in the world, where like even when he's drunk, she's like reaching for the ruby, and like all the trouble really starts over like the search, like women's search for jewelry. And like people don't understand how much I've like interpreted that into my own like collection. Like everything of value that I have is in some way or another a snake.
So you grew up, this is exactly what I wanted to talk to you about, being the daughter of someone like John Milius, which is like, you know, I mean, just amazing. Obviously, the base bloodline, let's say. I was going to call this the base bloodline weekend. You and Sarah Frisetta.
It sounds imazing, but
imagine if I had you both on at the same time. That would be even more amazing. That would be like, oh, I mean, that would be just so fortunate.
I would do it. Like, ask her if she wants to do it. I've never met her. I think that'd be super fun. And yeah, I apologize to the people that jumped on early for being so late. But that's one of the drawbacks of the Milius bloodline.
Well, we better introduce you anyways. I didn't even do that. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows, but anyway, Amanda is the daughter of John Milius, the man who directed Conan the Barbarian and Red Dawn and Jeremiah Johnson, and just amazing. I would think one of the greatest artists of the second half of the 20th century.
Yeah,
without hesitation, I would say that. Yes, and so he's your father, and I wanted to ask you. You're famous in your own right for other things, for films, for art and films, and
the President, which is there. Yeah.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. Yes, you're famous, and you're a White House staffer, or you were? Are you still? I don't know.
No, they. Well, first off, I left a year before, so I was there for 3 years because I was on the beachhead team of State Department, and then I left March of 2020, which was like right at the beginning when like COVID was happening, and I basically left to make the movie Plot Against the President and started working on that, like hit the ground running, like just started working on that right away. And then it came out October 10th, 2020. Right. But it remained the top, documentary on Amazon for over a year and a half, despite what some other conservative filmmakers like to claim, because I don't know why these people can't just like understand that we're trying to create an industry and not like just like it's not all about them. Like there's a lot of like older.
You agree from other conservative filmmakers? Why would you? Why?
Why do they not support new filmmakers? Because they've had a grift going for 25 years where there's only been like one conservative filmmaker for this entire time. And of course, it's not to his advantage.
And who is it? I don't even know. Who is it?
that anybody who actually knows how to make movies might perhaps enter the field and actually be classically trained and be good at it. So anyways, not to be negative, we won't be negative. It's a lovely Saturday. We won't right. We won't be bad. But
okay, so I want to say, when you're bringing up Valerian there, so you grew up, Conan the Barbarian, and you're saying you've got your own values from watching this movie. Obviously you would, because you're like it beyond the normal situation. Your father created it. So is that would he show it to you and say, what I wanted to ask you about what values he imparted to you growing up and how he went about it?
So my brothers and I have a hard time explaining it to people, because it's like so many people actually grew up and they were like, wow, like that was really like my father showed me that movie, and it was like these are the values that we care about, like, you know, family and like your tribe and vengeance and like staying true to who you are and like da da da. And it's like the weirdest thing because you're like, okay, yeah, I agree. And we grew up by those values because we watched that movie all the time, similar to how people would watch it who were not the children of the guy that made it. And I don't want to like disappoint anybody, but there's many such occasions where you're like, dude, you don't abide by this at all. Like you're like the opposite of this. Like the best is the swords, where we like place like this great emphasis on the swords, where we're like, oh my god, like it's like the sword, like we're like, you know, like the sword is like both swords are like the most, you know, the father's sword and then the sword that he finds in the cave.
Yeah.
And I'm like obsessed with these swords, and come to find out that at various times in all of our lives, he has promised the sword to each of the 3 siblings at some point, depending on like who was his favorite, like at the time. And my argument is that since I'm the youngest, that like that was then like obviously both swords belong to me. And then my brother who's like a guy, obviously, he's like, well, that's absurd. I'm a guy. I get the swords and I have, you know, 2 children. So 2 swords, 2 children. I must have the swords. And then my other brother is like, he wants nothing to do with the swords, wants nothing to do with dad, doesn't even give a shit. So it's like between me and my oldest brother. But then come to find out, actually, like he sold the swords in like the 80s. So
well, Arnold's got one. Arnold's got one. I've seen Arnold's got one.
No. Arnold's is a remake. The original swords were always with my dad. And he fully sold them, not in the 80s, in the 90s at some point. And then anybody who thinks that they've bought a original sword, like, for example, the best thing about my dad that'll explain a lot is, so also you need to know on movies, they make many props because they get broken and sometimes they're used for different things. There's swords that are used for fighting and swords that are used for getting dirty and da-da-da-da-da, like it's just the way it is. But for example, my dad has sold the Dirty Harry gun like 5 times.
Oh.
So I got and actually I think well, at least the real one or one of the main ones is at the NRA museum in Virginia, which
357 Magnum.
That's that's the most powerful what is he called? Handgun in the world. Yeah, that's at the NRA museum. But like that's the kind of guy he is, where you're just like he like obviously like that story came out of his brain mostly because it's not, I mean, yes, it's based on these comic book characters and like obviously that's a very inspiring story, but like the other thing that drives me nuts, and I'm friends with Oliver Stone's kids, so like I can say this because we've all grown up with like insane parents, so it's like we know we've got kind of a camaraderie.
Good.
The idea that like Oliver Stone wrote half that script is the most absurd thing I've ever, like if you saw the actual Oliver Stone script versus my dad's, like it's like when you watch the movie you're like, this is John Milius the movie, like what are you talking about? Like it's that's the question.
Yeah, Oliver Stone still is a lefty to this day, isn't he? He's like very is he
if it was his movie, like Conan would have like ridden off with the hippies and just been like, fuck it, like
he would have joined the flower, time enough for the flowers in the grave or whatever. But I don't like Oliver, like that is amazing, and I've seen them on the stage together. Like I watched
they're cool.
I watched them talking together, and they're good pals and everything. But like Oliver kind of gives them little digs too, like says, "Oh, I like John when he talks, but I don't know if he always thinks when he talks," which is kind of typical lefty superiority.
That is from the documentary Milius that they made like I don't know, like a handful of years ago.
10 years ago.
But I think I don't remember what year it came out, but it was probably like 2013-ish. But the thing is, anything before 2015, like so much changed in American politics at that point that the horseshoe of left and right, of extreme left and extreme right, like came together finally. And like you can't really, the funniest thing like is when Oliver Stone's Ukraine movie is banned, And I had to put out that meme that was like the one from whatever where the guy's getting hung and he's like first time. Because I'm like, my dad's movies have been banned for like, you know, like he's been like known as like the most controversial filmmaker or whatever ever since.
He doesn't have a banned movie. What does he have a banned movie?
My dad? No.
Yeah. No, he doesn't.
No.
Yeah.
There's no bad Milius movie.
But I mean, Stone is at least an old-fashioned kind of leftist. He just kind of
well, that's what I mean is they being so thoughtful, both of them. I think are actually on the same page at this point because my dad was never a Bush Republican. Like, and he even says in this one interview that actually came out, or a clip of it came out recently, and that there's this Apocalypse Now series that's like 12 episodes long. And they have this one episode about my dad writing Apocalypse Now. And they have found what I've been looking for a while, which is this clip of my dad talking about his politics. And he's like, you can't even like define my politics. He's like, I'm more of a communist than you are, but you call me a fascist. He's like, I'm a Maoist. Like, do you understand? Like, I want to see show trials of like the corporate, like, you know, like he like hates like white collar crime. Like, he likes to say it's because he's like, you know, I'm sure he wants to think of himself as like this, like, you know, just ultimate, like Genghis Khan sort of like man of like whatever.
But he is like, kind of, he's as close to that as you'd get in the modern world, I think.
I mean, he kind of is. Yeah. Yeah. I should make it like required viewing both the movie Milius and that episode of
what I remember about Milius. What I remember about Milius is in the opening 2 minutes. There's like a racial slur. There's like it's like a clip from Apocalypse Now with a racial slur.
So that's how you know it's gonna be fun. Yeah,
which is like hilarious, obviously. But like your dad was like, I mean, he called himself a Zen anarchist. I mean, you would know what he called himself better than I ever would. But that's what I read, anyways. And
no,
the Zen,
but like
the Zen part obviously comes from surfing, right? His surfing thing, right? Is that where he got the Zen? Kind of a Buddhist.
One would assume that's where he got the Zen part of it. Also, his obsession with like Eastern culture. Like, okay, so for most of my life, I made it my goal to try to figure out, because like any child wants to learn about the world by not arguing, but exchanging philosophical discussions with the patriarch, right? So you're like, okay, I'm trying to like figure out like how, like I'm not like trying to win an argument, but I'm just trying to learn about like where does he stand. And the thing about him is that you can drive yourself nuts because he's not like trying to win. He's playing characters sometimes, but sometimes he's teaching you something by playing the character. And like, so for the longest time, I was like, okay, well, Zen anarchy, that doesn't make any sense. I don't understand this. Like, what does this mean? Like, and I've like spent my life trying to figure out like, what does it mean to be a Zen anarchist? And then like, now I understand. And like, now I think I really understand. And the more I understand it, the more I think it's the only way to live, where you can possibly maintain your sanity in the world that we're in. Like, I think that Zen anarchy is the answer.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Is it sort of like an attitude exemplified in Conan, where each man is potentially like a kind of mercenary in a world opposed to him, and everything he gets is by the strength of his own hand, sort of totally anti-government in every possible way, kind of thing. Is that right? Maybe.
Yes, and I would say yes, but the Zen part has to come with being okay with that, and being Zen in the chaos, being Zen in the anarchy, because anarchy would convey that there's chaos around you constantly. And to maintain your Zen in that chaos means you win. And it's the only way to win. So I've actually even incorporated that so much into, I think it's kind of like the slogan of my company, which is like thrive in the chaos and tell the truth. But I think you're pretty close to it. I mean, I think that's why he was drawn to the Conan character. The thing that's crazy about it is I use Conan metaphors to try to explain stuff to my dad now, where I'm like if he has like a girlfriend, which frequent, or a wife or something, that'll like lock him up in the house.
Does he have a
and,
wife? I thought he was married. I thought he was married. Is he not?
No, they got divorced finally, thank God.
Okay.
The most recent one. And but then he has like this girlfriend who like keeps him locked up in the house and like disables his phone on like Father's Day and his birthday, and then he's like, oh, your children didn't call you, and you're like, no, we did, but you took the batteries out of his phone, and then you have to tell him in person, and he's like, nah. And you're like, dude, like that's really screwed up. But anyway, but like, so sometimes like when he was getting divorced from his fourth wife or his fifth wife or whichever one it was, I was like, dude, like throw her in the fire, man. She's a banshee. Like just get out of the cave, throw her in the fire. And he like likes that. And he's like, yeah, because he had a stroke, so he can't sleep that well, but he's like, throw her in the fire. And I was like, okay, all right. So like I know how to talk to him. Like it's actually like if you try to like reason with him and make sense with him, like it doesn't really work as well as if you like give him an analogy that he came up with on his own.
So it's excellent and unusual that you would understand him so well, and you're his daughter. Like usually, like, pardon me for saying, but like girls don't. Girls I would know and that generally don't like Conan. They go tee hee when you're watching it, then sort of they don't. What they would have a hard time understanding. Obviously, you grew up underneath him, and he tutored you in the ways of natural law and
well, I'm just like not. Well, I mean, the thing is that most girls just aren't really that bright. Like they like things that are like, I don't know. Sometimes they're
Love
better
Island and like that or whatever.
Aesthetics or whatever. Well, that's a disaster. But like, I mean, like even like whatever. But I there's the word exceptional exists for a reason. The thing that I've noticed that I think is weird, because like, for example, I'm preparing to do this talk at NatCon, which is the National Conservatism Conference that happens once a year. It's happening in Florida. And we're going to show one of my dad's movies, Wind and the Lion. And which is another really, really, really great movie. But the thing is, I'm like working on my notes, and I'm like, my dad wrote the best female characters that there are. Like, and nobody talks about it. They're like, oh, he's so machismo, like he's so Mr. Macho, like blah, 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 blah. And you're like, yeah, and you are so dumb as to miss the most complex, interesting, strong, by the way, like remember the era of like the strong female character where like it was just like some stupid girl doing like kung fu and like putting a knife in the table and being like, yeah. And you're like, okay, I want to throw up. Meanwhile, like Sandal was an actual athlete, as was Schwarzenegger, but she was a dancer. But she was incredibly strong, and her role is amazing. Like the role of Valeria is one of the most exciting, interesting characters in film. I suppose
the only other movies I saw her in, sadly, was Hell Comes to Frogtown. You ever see that? Hell Comes to Frogtown?
No.
It's got that's the only other movie I saw her in, and right after Conan, I think. But it's got Roddy Piper, which is excellent. I mean, that's the second best. The second best to Arnie is Roddy Piper, and the only other movie he did other than They Live is Hell Comes to Frogtown. It's not a brilliant movie though; it's flawed, but whatever.
I still think it sounds like it's good for a watch. I would totally check it out.
And in Conan, that's the part I thought maybe Stone wrote, because yes, he does write excellent female characters, but the only part in Conan, not that I would ever say that film is flawed in any way imaginable, because it's not. But my only complaint, being a fan of like the Robert E. Howard Conan, well, the only complaint I would say is that the fact that he got so wrapped up in the love interest Conan, and that she even saved him at one point, like it's good, it works, and it's great. But I mean, in the original books, like in The Frost Giant's Daughter, it starts off he's chasing some woman off into the snow, I think, like basically to rape her, or like, I mean, once she probably would just succumb to him naturally, anyways. But you know what I mean? He was like a harsh guy. There's one of the books. It starts off in the first 3 pages. A husband walks into Conan's in bed with this guy's wife. The guy walks in the room. Conan jumps out of the bed, kills the guy, and jumps out the window. And that's like the first.
Why jump out of the window? Okay. That's amazing.
He was kind of like Conan. The idea that Conan would have a big romance was the only almost flaw, but even then, it worked really well.
Well, it works because Valeria is Valeria. She's not just like some town's chick. She's a thief. She's a flawed character herself. She's extremely strong. She's philosophically complicated. And then the fact that, like, I think I said this on Twitter or something sometime. I'm like, if your girl isn't willing to go to a wizard, wrap you in a shroud, bring you back to life while fighting the demons for you so that you can fight your most important battle, and then take a rattlesnake arrow in the ribs for you, she's not really your chick.
Yeah.
So I think
Rattlesnake arrow, right.
yeah, I think she's a pretty worthy
She was
a pretty worthy one. The thing that my complaint is the ending where he goes back to get the stupid princess. Like, you know, that's not the original ending.
Oh no, I didn't know that. Tell. Oh, this is something I'd really like to hear.
Yeah, no, that I forget exactly how the original ending goes because it's almost impossible to find, because my
you must ask your dad.
No, well, his cut, his like, so after he gets married, so I think his brain melted a little bit, like after he got married to like the fourth wife, because like then the princess got stuck around, where like he goes and like gets the princess, and you're just like, who gives a shit about this stupid princess? Like, leave her to the, like, I get it's part of the like it's a very like writing technique like thing where it's like, okay, like he has to save the day, but you're like, you kind of already did. You killed Thulsa Doom. That was your mission. Who gives a shit about the other mission? Like, I have to get my daughter back. That was the craziest thing, though. Is also, it's a very touching thing when the king says all of that, but our dad doesn't really like live by that ethos.
By which one? By the
At a certain point, the only thing left in life that matters is the love between a father and his daughter. Because you know the whole thing about the daughter getting like
great speech.
Snake cult, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't think, I don't know how it's gonna take, but he hasn't really reached that point yet. But that's okay. Like, I don't mind being the Conan character and having to avenge the family that I don't know if it would have worked out that way or not.
Are you saying you're not beloved of your father? Is that what you're saying? Or?
No, I am, but I have a feeling like, you know, for he's a complicated character.
He's got to be. I mean, you're talking about a legend. You don't have a normal father. You have a
no, I don't. He's very abnormal. I could definitely.
But I mean, you're the most famous of his siblings as well so far, and you know,
of his children, sort of. I mean, my brother chooses a more, you know, a less controversial, sort of more traditionally, like, you know, he's a very big prosecutor in California, which is where we need good prosecutors. He is he went to law school. My other brother is a musician, very accomplished musician in New York. And like, I'm the one that's like, I mean, people have been saying that about us since I was a kid, that I was the most like him. It used to be considered an insult, but I suppose now I always thought it was cool. Because I always thought it was kind of funny, because I was like, why would you give the boys, 1911s to like, what do they call it? Field strip them with your eyes blindfolded, where you have to take the gun apart and put it back together in a certain amount of time. And I was like, why did everybody else get a handgun when they turned 18, but not me? And he's like, because I don't believe that you won't shoot one of your boyfriends with it. And I was like, well, that's really none of your concern, is it? Like, that sounds like a me problem.
What a great answer. That is great. That's excellent.
I was like, you're the one that tried to put a hit out on one of them anyways. Like, why do you like?
What did he? Really?
Who knows?
Seriously?
I don't know.
Oh.
Has
he ever killed anyone? That's the question. Did he pull a gun on an executive, supposedly? Or that's in some, did he really? I don't know.
No, he really did stuff like that. I mean, people ask kind of like, why was he canceled, if you want to use such a, if you want to use, as they say, the nomenclature of our day, it's an ongoing question of whether it's like politics or whether it was just sort of like his persona that kind of like the industry changed, where it's like in the 70s, like, yes, they would have been like fine with wacky stuff, like my dad pulling a gun on somebody in a meeting. But after a certain point of time, like the 90s, I think, like Hollywood was run by a different style of person that would not have been so amused by that, and maybe not wanted to put up with it. And also, like, I mean, he became kind of a difficult person to deal with at a certain point. Like,
oh, did he?
Well, I mean, he was, you know, sick. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Is that what happened? Really? He became.
No, I don't think it's that exactly, but it's like he's not like his style went out. If you think about it, like I'm hard pressed to think of a movie that was like where you're like, wow, that was a fantastic script. Like after he sort of declined in Hollywood, it was like more about the age of like the director, and then we got into the age we're in slowly now.
So you're not so it's not him, it's that the world itself changed, and we're in this
industry changed, the culture changed, like there's a lot of things that changed, and then obviously the politics don't help. It's like if all of those things were one thing, maybe it would have he could have survived, but I
believe they're linked. I believe they're all linked. But like I did want to bring up the fact that for people who don't know, that your father was in like the gang of people that created culture for people certainly of my age, and like in the era before the turn of the 21st century. It was Coppola, Lucas, Scorsese, your father, and he influenced and wrote for all of them. You know, he wrote Apocalypse Now, and he wrote he wrote the over the phone or something. He wrote told Spielberg the best parts of Jaws and of one of the Indiana Jones movies. Like he told him over the phone, apparently. Like, you know, and Spielberg gets more recognition and stuff. Or and then also Spielberg's not half as good as your dad. Not even 1/4 as good. Really.
Well, I mean, obviously he's a great director. He's always been very nice to my dad. I mean, this is the thing people forget. Like before 2015, like nobody really cared what their friends' politics were. That was my only criticism of the this episode. I keep going back to the Apocalypse Now. I think it's like episode 12 or something, where it just focuses on my dad's writing of the movie, which is literally, I've never seen anything so accurate. Like I've had to correct people where I'm like, no, he didn't read Heart of Darkness again until after he wrote the movie. He read it once in high school, and then that's it. Because I got sent to the same high school, so I don't even think they changed the curriculum that much since when he was there, like in like the 50s. So
they wouldn't be teaching it now, I'm pretty sure. That's like basically the story of like, you know, a white guy who goes and becomes like a god amongst the tribe in Africa. I
think it sounds like an everlasting. You could But yeah, so he had a professor at USC, then said nobody had been able to turn it into a film properly. And I've heard the story a million times from my dad's mouth that saying that was like waving a red flag in front of a bull. That meant he was going to do so and succeed. And of course, it's like probably the best movie ever. I mean, I am partial because it's my dad's movie that he wrote. Like, and I, you know, our families grew up together. The Coppola's, actually Talia Shire, who is Coppola's sister, had the house across the street from my grandmother, and so the sort of younger generations sort of lined up, and we were kind of friends when we were growing up and whatnot. But are you
pals with the director? Yeah, Sophia, is it
I don't know her. I don't. She's older than I am, and I never hung out with her. I don't.
Right, so you're quite young for your dad. Had you quite late in life then, did he? Obviously, your mother.
Yeah, third marriage, Hollywood style. Third marriage and a second marriage, kind of.
I recognize your mother. I saw pictures of her, and I recognize her from like something I've seen, but I can't quite put my finger on it.
Thing was, if you're from California, there's this book called Island of the Blue Dolphins, which is required reading for like I think 4th grade curriculum or something in the public schools. And so frequently the Universal made this movie called Island of the Blue Dolphins, which is the story of this Indian girl that gets stuck on the Channel Islands or something. They teach California history to people in California. Anyways, at least at one point they did before they taught them about like how to become a transgender or whatever. So my mom is the star of that movie. That's because she's most of my family is German Jewish, like we're all Bavarian on both sides, which I actually figured out finally. But my mom is she screws it up. She screws up my pure DNA with the, no, I'm just kidding. With the, she's like a quarter Native American, but she actually is. Like, she's not lying. Like, she's truly not lying. And if you look at her pictures from the 60s and 70s, she played like the hot like Indian chick and like all
she looks like someone I would have seen on like Charlie's Angels or something like that. When I see her picture, I'm like, where do I know her from?
Yeah, I am very blessed to have even gotten a shred of her genetics.
Well, that's where you get that's where you get the smoky well, no, your father was quite a brunette as well, if I think of his older pictures.
Yeah, I mean, he had really, really curly hair because we were more Jewish on that side. But I get, thankfully, I mean, truly, like Hollywood. I mean, don't get me started on genetics, but like I did kind of like win a little bit of the lottery because I could have ended up looking like my dad with my mom's philosophical mind. But luckily,
so she's is she liberal or something?
No, she's fine, but I mean, she's like I'd much rather have my dad's like brain in some ways than and my mom's looks than like
your dad when he was young had a really looks. There was a physiognomy. This is something that's vanished from the world. Maybe it was the age. Probably since like
the physiognomy of my dad at any point is that of a dictator or or like or some kind of like barbarian conqueror. Like like there's like
a lot of guys back then, a lot of guys of that time were like that. This is what I think has happened, like environmentally or from feminism. You don't see the strong jaws and the deep set and the the harsh brows like anymore. I mean, rarely. You do maybe now and again, but more guys were like that back then.
He's a real throwback, and then you add to the fact that he always wanted to look like a mountain man, and like that was his whole thing. Like, he had this real rebellious spirit even when he was younger. Like, you remember his family was a fairly well-to-do family that was in Los Angeles. His dad had retired before they were even the kids were even born, and they'd moved to Los Angeles and built this like beautiful mid-century modern house, and like and he rebelled against all of that. And I think one time my brother said, because when they shot that Milius movie, I was like too young and too freaked out to really behave correctly on camera.
No, you look good. I remember thinking, there she is. And yeah.
But I'm like barely in it. Like when they have to use something I say, they're like, oh God, we got to put her. Because like I couldn't speak up in front of the microphone. I was like,
I thought you would look totally.
I've never been comfortable in front of the camera. So I always was like, oh, I'll be behind the camera. That way, no way I will ever have to be in front of it. And then it was like, here, make Plot Against the President. Now you can be on TV every day. And I was like, so that movie, my brother actually at one point had said, I think in the outtakes or something, but he was like, yeah, Amanda's definitely is the most like our dad. She's the most likely to forget your birthday and ask you for a favor on that day. To do something impressive at some point. And then also to rebel against these sort of, I don't know how to put it except for well-to-do kind of background. I mean, my dad would convince all his friends that he was like a lifeguard, a surfer, a mountain man, a whatever. But you're like...
But he was a mountain man for a while, wasn't he? He did go in the mountains and live there like...
That was our high school. They sent us to Bad Kids School, the same high school. I went to the same high school that he did, like 3 different schools. I've actually now, including USC Cinematic School of Arts, I have been to 3 schools that he went to.
Okay.
I don't know why
So-
they thought that would work, but anyways,
The school put him in the woods and made him trap furs and stuff. Is that what you're saying?
but he liked that, like, because
Oh.
I have to admit, he is certainly more of a mountain man than I am. It was way too late for me. Like, I was already like a bad city girl by then. Like, I was like, I want to move to New York. I'm gonna like. I was not.
Well, you have to be a woman as well. I mean, you can't be totally Conan or whatever, right? Women do not love trapping in the woods through a cold winter.
I mean, I did it for a while, but then after a certain amount of time, I got kind of grossed out by it. Like for girls, I have seen my share of and dealt with my share of like hunted animals. Like I've dealt with that like a lot, and it's just not my thing. Like I am a really, really good skeet shooter. I'm an amazing sporting clay shooter. I'm a great trap shooter. I can shoot totally alongside my parents. And
Amazing.
The other day I won one time, which was I hadn't shot in a year, and it was amazing. So I'm certainly not afraid of guns or anything like that. But I kind of like declined the hunting trips after a while. I was just like, this is kind of freaking me out. Like I don't really
the horror of it. There's an element of horror there. Like
I was like, this is really not for me. But I don't have a problem with anybody that does it. I think it's cool. I don't particularly like want to.
Well, it's more honest. It's more honest than just buying your meat saran wrapped and killed by somebody else and not knowing anything about it. It's more.
It's legit. Like it's a legit form of finding food. I think that's cool. But
you have to be able to do it if you're going to eat meat in the first place. Is what I would say. You should be able to.
Right.
You
should have spent.
That's what your father, I think, would be. Is like his approach to everything is honesty, like brutal honesty. Anybody who has those kind of natural values, it's honesty before everything else, right? That's why he's not liberal, because he doesn't want to. He wants to because the choice through life, all your choices through life, there's no easy answer out of anything. Usually, you have to make a choice that comes at the expense of something else. So, sort of liberal type people sort of make a fantasy world.
I don't want to burst your bubble, but like, that's the character that he's invented for.
Oh, really? He's not like that.
Assumption.
There's
no one who doesn't understand that in his daily life less than my dad.
No.
Like, no.
Oh, you have burst my bubble. You burst my bubble.
Truth. He will.
What?
Literally, I mean, like, I don't know. I'm not speaking poorly of him because I love the guy. Like, he's my dad. He's the best. He made me who I am. He's great. But like, if you think that like my dad lives by the values of like honesty and like everyone must like take care of themselves and whatever.
Well, no. It's not necessarily that. It's not necessarily that. It's more like
not how he lives. But
no. It's more like survival and like not kidding yourself about.
Right. You know? Yeah. As a trust fund child, it's really easy to live on the survival of the hills of Bel Air. I myself have done it, and it's treacherous. Let me tell you. There are rattlesnakes in the hills of Bel Air.
Okay. Well, whatever way he is now, it seems to me he definitely was at one point.
When he was in high school,
something closer to Jeremiah Johnson then.
Yeah, he created the term. Yeah, that's where all that stuff came from. And then he moved back to LA and got another house in Bel Air, and then one in Pacific Palisades for one of his wives, and the other one in like Beverly Hills. And then my mom is in Bel Air, and then like he's got like
those are the luxuries of a king. He's King Conan. He's done it already. You know,
he's King
these are
Conan,
the luxuries of a king.
4 divorces will end you in a condo under lock and key by a cross-eyed like 60-year-old ex-hooker from Manchester who's now at the mercy of.
You're breaking my heart. I'm gonna.
And the best thing is that my mom and him are like still best friends. Even though they've been divorced for like 30 years or whatever, who knows why, and they'll like go shooting together still. So if I talk to him, I have to like talk to him in the car on their way to shooting, because then they can put it on the speakers in the car so he can hear me. And like, he wants to talk about politics and he wants to hear about like what's going on and like all this stuff. And like, that's like the way I talk to him, because like, he's not allowed to talk to his kids.
He doesn't get any news. He doesn't know what's going on.
No, he watches the news all the time, but he thinks I know secret things. And he insists that I must know.
What news does he watch? He doesn't watch. He's not like watching CNN or some fucking thing.
No, he's just watching Fox like nonstop all day long.
Okay,
Yeah. like all day long. No, look, no, he was like basically a Trumper before Trump existed, because if you remember, like I said, he was not a Bush Republican. Like, he was a Republican, but he hated the Bushes. He hated the whole, like, even though he was like a pro-war guy, he was like not a neocon exactly. Like, he just didn't have, there wasn't a word for us, which is like one of the reasons why I go to these conferences, and I try to participate in conversations that give us a philosophical underpinning for what our political philosophy is.
What do they think of you, these more standard conservative people? They don't know what to make of you, or do you find success with this?
I think it depends if I'm wearing the skull and snake ring, or if I try to keep those home when I know I'm meeting with like a seriously evangelical crowd. I'll try not to like wear the golden skull with like the snake and like the diamonds. Because already the star, well, most of them like that, but I mean, I'm like severely right wing, so like, you know, most people at this point will take what they can get. Like, they're not gonna be that picky, but I think I've done pretty well, just in the fact that, like, at least I've woken up the establishment conservatives to the fact that these entities, these institutions are not our friend. They're not like this whole like Hannity. Oh God, like his whole.
I don't even know. Like, for my own part, I don't even think, like, when I gave up on Trump early on, because I thought he can't do anything. He's totally, even when he got in, like, I don't want to. That's my view, anyways. Like, I supported him at the beginning, but it seemed like he couldn't do anything. All he did was like make tweets. I know, but like, so if it's that corrupt, that's why I think, sort of, dare I say, acceleration.
What's the answer then? You want to just go just build?
If they're so, if well, do you ever hear about Oswald Spengler? His theory?
Yeah.
If that's true, then there's nothing you can do. If the beast wants to die, you would let it lay down and die, and then hope something.
But in the meantime, our job is to procreate and to teach the values to the next generation, and that I think is important. So for that reason,
especially you've got that.
We are required to play Conan for our children, is what we are required to do.
And Jeremiah Johnson and Red Dawn.
Jeremiah Johnson and Dirty Harry and
Apocalypse Now.
And Big Wednesday. We need to talk about
Big Wednesday. Yeah.
Big Wednesday was a huge thing, because like, if you ask my dad, even to this day, like, my brothers and I would probably say we were raised by Conan. Like, that's like I can't watch that movie without like bursting into tears, like, just immediately, because I'm just like, my childhood, like, whoa.
What, Conan?
Yeah, you killed my family. You killed my mother. Like, the thing about like, okay, like Conan, like if I was Conan, like that's the thing is I like try to explain to my dad like why like I do the things I do, and I'll be like, okay, well, like what would Conan do? Like, would Conan give up and like just be like, oh, okay, like my dad happens to be married to like a harpy, so like I'm just gonna let him die in the cave? You'd be like, no, I would like come in there like knife swinging, and like she'd have to die, but like I would save you. And he's like, I don't want you to kill my. I'm like, no, it's fine. I'll do it. You don't even have to ask. So he's you know, it is weird being like the daughter and like the most similar to him. So it's like,
let's talk about it. I wanted to cover just a few things about his work. For like, so he was part of that group, Scorsese and those guys, right?
Right.
He was influencing them all incredibly, and those guys like invented the culture of the end of the 20th century. Really, they were brought on by the studios were dying, and this is something that would never happen now. But they decided they had to talent scout crazy guys from film schools, and they found this group of guys. George Lucas. I mean, these are people that Spielberg, your dad, fucking Scorsese. Who else was there?
Well, they didn't exactly talent scout it. I mean, you have to remember they did this. They did it themselves. Like, this is one of the things that I'm trying to explain as to like, well, why are you creating a production company as opposed to just making like one movie after another? And like, the first answer would be that I'm not a grifter. I'm actually trying to contribute something to the culture. And number two is, this is what American Zoetrope was. If you remember, Coppola was a year or two older.
That's the one I forgot. Yeah.
And what he had done is he had created American Zoetrope, which received some funding from Warner Brothers.
Wait, wasn't he? He was the first one that had success, and he gave them all money or something. Is that what happened?
Well, he created a production company, so he was able to fund a variety of scripts and projects. So that's what I'm doing. I'm not just creating like project after project. I'm creating a company so that I may employ and produce movies that aren't even mine. And so like when you hear Coppola talk about how he's like, well, the first script we had ready was Apocalypse Now. And that's why they did that. And initially it was going to be by Lucas, which is crazy to think about. Like, but then they were able to
would have been lame, brother.
Worked on Star Wars forever, and like we all know how that worked out. And
great. Yeah,
and then and Spielberg was a friend of theirs, but he hadn't gone to USC. But he was kind of like an added member of the USC mafia. And what they really were doing is like, they resented the studio system. But I've talked about this on other podcasts, which is like, okay, I get it. There was a studio system. And if you were that age at that point, you'd be like, well, if I'm not in it, it's preventing artists from doing art. And you're like, okay, yeah, but now we've had 30, 40 years post studio system. And I would be hard pressed to think of one movie that was as good as anything that was created during the studio system. So like there's something to be said for like art. Just because like you made a macaroni painting doesn't mean it's as good as the person next to you. Like art tends to have this thing where it's like everybody gets a participation trophy. Like, and that element of like mediocrity has really sunken in art, which has made a lot of conservatives uninterested in it, has made a lot of intelligent people uninterested in it. And that's a big problem, because basically art actually is, I mean, you can even go back to Plato on this, is the most important. I mean, he would say things to be lifelike is the most dangerous, but there's a power in that. And it has to be, you have to play by the rules. Not everything is the same. Like, and we see that so much in conservative or dissident or alternative film. Is there's one thing that I thank my lucky stars for, which is that I went to a very serious film school. Like, they would never let me make the mistakes that I see people around me making all the time. Like, that just make them look like idiots. Like they're just amateur pieces of shit. And you're like, oh my God, I would never do that. It's like such an easy mistake not to make. And we don't hold ourselves to that quality line. And that's why the left wins, because the left is playing by the rules. They're playing by the entertainment rules. But the right is like, oh, all I have to be is controversial and then it'll be interesting. Or all I have to be is saying something that the left disagrees with and then it'll work. And you're like, no, you're making homework assignment on video. You're making videos. You're not making cinema. You're making videos.
Yeah.
Like, they're horrible.
Well, I actually wrote a book on art. This is the whole reason I took to social media. And if you would let me, I would send it to you. And maybe
yes.
And I've been writing books. I've been writing Pulp Fiction, science fiction compilations too, that are like stories of reminiscent of things from his Conan, Robert E. Howard, Weird Tales and stuff. But anyway, if you allow me, I'll send them to you later. But I don't want to grift about that. But I want to say, like, about in my book about art, I would say, when you're talking about art and Plato and stuff like that, see, everything nowadays, that the idea that art is personal expression overtook everything.
Oh my God, I hate it. I hate it. Like, I hate the concept. Like, art is personal expression. No, it's not. Your life is not even interesting enough for your personal expression. I don't give a fuck about your personal expression. You're not even an interesting person. I don't even want to know you. Like, if you cannot make perfect art and then you can break the rules, like, I don't even want to talk to you. Like, I can't.
It needs to be linked to tradition to have the long-standing value, like going back in time. And it needs to be linked to a tradition, probably a bit tribal as well. Like, you think of like a Roman arch versus fucking what's her name's Unmade Bed or whatever, one of these, contemporary artists that just do not, like arrange a pile of garbage or whatever. But that's another thing about your father. He lived in that interesting.
Time.
Your father was very much a traditionalist, but he also grew up with that beat poet kind of thing. He loved Kerouac, wasn't it? Didn't he love Kerouac?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he did.
Yes.
And all that. There was guys like him and Hunter S. Thompson, guys like this that were like, kind of. They weren't before the hippies. They got influenced by all that stuff, but they didn't become hippies.
Yeah, he checked out right at the right time. So he, I mean, even though you could really lay a lot of blame for art and the entire country going downhill at the feet of the beatniks, my dad did get into them right at the right time, and then checked out right before the whole hippie thing. And again, as I gotta say, you gotta watch this episode they did on this Apocalypse Now thing, because it talks about how he created the Apocalypse Now button out of the Nirvana Now thing that people were doing. But yeah, like he gave, when I was growing up really, really young, he was like super into, he had given my brother a book of Jim Morrison's poetry, which is the most like that would be like the longest end of it, the most recent thing that he like gave to us. And then but mostly it was On the Road and a lot of Kerouac and some just a lot of the beatnik stuff, because his whole thing was that he had to learn how to write in every style. And so he gave me a lot of Steinbeck as well. Like I would even argue that I think Steinbeck might have been his favorite. Steinbeck and obviously
I haven't read him. I don't even know. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to read Steinbeck. I mean, I would actually not even start with The Grapes of Wrath. I would say East of Eden is probably my favorite book ever. It really, it's just amazing. But yeah, so he was like really into a lot of early American writers like Herman Melville and like all the best.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
he could write in any. That was his thing. Is he was like, you are not ready to have a style until you can imitate the style of all the greats that came before you. And that's the thing, is my dad was disciplined. Like he was beyond disciplined. Like he didn't turn in a single thing late. He never blamed writer's block. He didn't believe in like the creative spirit that would like move you. He was like, writing is like a manual labor job. You just write 10 pages a day and it's like digging a hole, and you don't let anything stop you. And I think that was one thing that gets overlooked a lot, is like how professional he was in that. He didn't have this like goofy idea of like this sort of like spiritual sense of art in a sense, or he didn't even just consider it like art at all, where he was just like, no, this is a job. Like if you're lucky enough that like you write as a job, like you better just do it. So I think he took it seriously enough, and you can really feel that in the work. There's a consistency there. The thing that sucks, that actually for yourself and your fans, I would think, it just sucks that the Genghis Khan movie, which is basically the closest thing I can think of to a follow-up to Conan, but it's real, just in the epic size of it and in the epic themes that it deals with. It really is like the most amazing. It is definitely his magnum opus. It's definitely meant to be his final film. It's his like true gift to the world, and it's not.
Is it written? Could you make?
Yeah, it's been written for like 20 years. It's not going to get made though.
You won't make it. Maybe you can.
I mean, I could maybe make it, but because it's not interesting, and it's a long, boring story of why it can't be made right now. But it has a lot. Okay, remember like when Nero was like in charge of Rome, and he was like, I want to put my horse on the Senate, and people were like,
Caligula put the horse on the Senate.
Caligula? No, Caligula had all the parties. Nero put his horse on the Senate.
Oh, I think
one of the okay. One of us is right, but either way, like, okay, so my dad would get really close to being like, I think my dog should be a producer on this movie, and I'm going to write that into the deal. And so you're like, dude, you can't do, like, he meant like his various wives and girlfriends, but you're like, yo, you can't do that. Like, these people are no one, and no one knows who they are, and then they're bringing their boyfriends and like weird people on, and then you get this like cloud of hangers on that just like sift around my dad, and they're like, yeah, I'm a producer on the Genghis Khan movie. And like, you have to be careful with that sort of thing in Hollywood. Like, there has to be a very easily done.
Well, Hollywood's not like it used to be. Like in his day, it was all surfing and you know, that beat the Doors and stuff like it. Now if I think of California, I think of like meth and fucking, you know, I don't think of the same things that would have been going on back in his day.
It's
right?
definitely not the
like
same.
Parlors, meth, and hip hop is what I think of.
The industry has changed as well. It's very I mean, back in the day, remember my dad, Steven, and George Lucas traded points on Star Wars, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and Big Wednesday, because they all thought that Big Wednesday was going to be like the big summer hit that year.
Oh, and it flopped, didn't it?
And so I don't think anyone's ever traded points again ever since then, because like that was like the worst deal ever, like for those dudes. But like,
your dad was really, I mean, you know this, but it's not just like your bias, because I really would say your dad was the most talented of them all, and he helped them all. Like,
I mean, those dudes totally say that. They get that. Like, he was the raconteur, like he was the storyteller of their generation. Like Stevens, I mean, after he had his stroke and he couldn't talk anymore, like those guys were like legitimately devastated and legitimately, I think, faced for the first time with their own mortality. And it was like, I can't say enough how kind they were to him and to my family, and to like there was no, they were very
oh, I don't mean to speak poorly of them. I just mean he was. I do think he was.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying it was known amongst them that like he was this once in a generation. I literally just spit on my own lip. That's lovely. Okay. Valeria.
Yeah. Do you want to live forever?
Do you want to live forever?
You want a podcast forever? Your dad was like, there's that scene. In one of the documentaries I read, there's like Scorsese had them all over at his house, and I'm dying to see this movie now. It shows clips of it in the documentary. They watched some fucking World War I era movie about like dogfights with early planes or whatever. I don't remember the name of it, and they're all watching it, and like this shows a clip from the movie. It looks amazing. It's silent. I think it's a silent film, and just like your dad at one point pops up and goes, "This is the type of movies we should make." And they're all like, yes, you're right. It's like the scene from Conan, like, that is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could tell he was like the leader. He's the one instigating a lot of, because he,
I mean, if you see in, okay, so even in his film thesis from USC, which happened to be animated, there's this line in it.
I've seen it, yeah.
Like, I want to be a mogul. Or I think he said that when he got in trouble at school. Yeah. He got in trouble at school one day, and they were like filming where they weren't supposed to be or something like that. And it was like, do you kids even want to graduate? Do you want to be filmmakers? And they were like in trouble or something. So they were like quiet. And then all of a sudden my dad was like, I don't want to be a filmmaker. I want to be a mogul. And they all started laughing or something like that. Like, I mean, he has always been that guy that's kind of like willing to jump on the table and be like, we should be yeah, exactly. That's very, definitely very him. I mean, and that's what it took, and that's what they did. And I mean, when you watch Star Wars, that's what it is. Star Wars is a silent film era dogfight.
Yeah. Little models made of balsa wood and they're exploding in the air. It's totally from this clip of this movie. I'm dying to see this movie. I must find out what it is. I must look at that documentary.
Well, it's probably the it's probably the Howard Hughes one, or the.
No, and maybe it is, but I don't know. I don't know. I obviously wasn't paying attention, and then all of a sudden I missed like where they said what it was, and I must go back and review that. But even like Lucas, I mean, we talk about these names. We're talking about people that influenced thought in the world and culture up to this point, and even now, say when everything's so dry, there's no culture, everything's in stasis. It's like 2000 lasts forever now, and they don't permit someone like your dad. It takes someone like your dad to create a new thing, some kind of
It's a little like
rebellious,
that,
masculine guy, and they're not going to let that in. Like I remember when he was talking about doing King Conan about 10 years ago or more.
Oh my God, so much longer ago than that, and it was
Was
so
it? Okay.
cool.
I'm
And
old myself now. Yeah, I don't. But I can remember that.
King Conan's been around like forever. I mean, my dad's got 30 unmade movies, and
Well,
they're all.
I just remember him talking about it and how excellent it sounded, and it sounded fucking perfect. And but
Yeah,
yet
I mean,
it wasn't made, and they wouldn't give him money, and it wasn't done.
I'll send you a copy. We'll exchange addresses. I'll send you a copy, and I'll send you
That
Genghis.
is excellent.
Yeah, because it's really a shame that they haven't been made, and they're not gonna get made. I mean, if they make King Conan, they're gonna have to.
You could have made it with Arnold back then. Arnold is old. They could have done it. Like it could have been like a
okay.
true.
Here's my idea. Actually, okay, yeah, we make it with Arnold, but like, guess what? Like, King Conan centers heavily around Conan's son. It turns out there's this guy that looks exactly like Conan, happens to also be his son, who I think needs to be in King Conan. And his name is Joe Bania. He's Arnold's son that does not share his last name.
Oh, that guy, right?
Yeah. You should listen, you should follow him on Instagram, and we all should, because that dude looks identical to Arnold during the Conan years. And he's only going to get better.
Everyone uses Instagram, but me, it seems like I don't really use it. I have one, but I don't hardly use it.
I mean, he's amazing. Like so my fantasy dream would be to cast him as baby Conan, and then Arnold as old man Conan, and then
so this is in your thoughts. You might do this. Is that the way it is?
They're not going to let me do that. Like, Warner Brothers owns like all. I mean, we'll see. But like, remember, I operate outside of the system. This is one of the funny things I had to explain to my dad, because he'd be like, he'll pull out he'll remember some script that he wrote, and because there's like 30 of them, and he'll be like, oh, you should, in his way, he'll be like, you should pull out that XYZ movie that I wrote and make that. And I'm like, bro, remember when you were sitting in Paramount or wherever, Warner Brothers, like smoking cigars, writing all day, and you were getting paid? So remember how you wrote all those movies during that time? That's why we don't own them, because you were getting paid to smoke cigars and hang out with your weird Hells Angels friends and write movies. And like, that's why now they're not owned by us. They're owned by those people who were paying you to smoke cigars and like hang out with like your weird, crazy friends. Like, because like after a while, it just.
Is there other movies he's responsible for that I don't know about?
There's 30 unmade scripts.
Okay. And I'm sure they got to be brilliant. I mean, nobody wrote like he did. The characters, the dialogue.
I mean, like, do you understand like what a shame it is that even like the ones I can think of off the top of my head are so good, and like I could make them like that. Like they're like, I remember having conversations with him about them, like as he was writing them. Like, I know I could do these, but they're absolutely under lock and key of the wokest institutions in America. And like, that's what I mean. Like
about that. And get them out of the vault.
No, it's too. It's not even about getting them out of the vault. Like, you have to legally own them to make them and make money from them. Like, this is like, they're not like hidden. I have them all, but like, it's just one of these frustrating things that like, yeah, like when I've tried to explain, like, he's a genius writer, but like as far as like hiring like a long-term like business manager or somebody who could have like prevented this from happening and maybe been like, hey, like, the studios haven't made one of your movies in like, I don't know, 10 years. Perhaps we depart from that, live off of less money, bro. Like, I don't know, buy a couple cartons less per year of like Cuban imported cigars.
Is he still smoking cigars?
One or two less like gazillion-dollar Fabries. And like, perhaps we will like, then you can own your work, and maybe one day one of your children will grow up, and then your legacy could go on even farther. And he's like, nah, I want the cigars. Like, you're like, so it's like, I try to explain to people, you're like, yeah, he's Conan. Sort of like not really.
No. that's
he's
Conan-ish.
concerned with his legacy, but like not exactly. Like it's like
Well,
so,
he's still got the legacy. As far as I'm concerned, he's made his
yeah.
mark forever, and he's
No,
joined the Forever
absolutely.
Club.
I'm just so glad that you guys like love him and like appreciate him and like.
Well, everybody knows Conan, but they don't necessarily know the other stuff, and they don't understand that the values in Conan are in all his work.
They are.
you
And
know?
even in Big Wednesday, which you would not think would make sense because it's a surfing movie, but actually I would say that in a sense those two movies teach quite similarly the same lessons. Like, so if I was raised like, it's almost like, okay, yeah, like I had a, like, yes, I hung out with my dad a lot as I was growing up, but like really I was raised by like those two movies. Like those two movies imparted values in me that if I never watched any of my dad's movies and I just hung out with him, I would be a very different person.
Yeah.
I guess that's the best way of saying it.
You seem like a very cool person in this modern world. Trash world. Did you ever surf yourself? Did you ever surf? No.
I was made to get on a surfboard at a young age and try to survive my way back to the beach one winter. I don't know if I would call it surfing, but
well, okay, I did something similar, and I did something similar. I was not great at it, but I do remember the feeling.
That was not even my dad's fault, but he did stand by and watch. My brothers were like, everybody in our family surfs. It's your turn. Like here, like you're kind of getting tied to this surfboard, and it's going.
I can see there's something to it. I remember when the wave picks you up and carries you, and there's a feeling like.
I remember feeling like I was going to die, but
if you get into it, I do understand where the Zen comes from, the natural values and things through this kind of.
I went to Hawaii and I did learn how to surf properly. And then I surfed Orange County, which was to me a far more mellow place to surf than Malibu or Santa Monica. And so once I started hanging out in Orange County, I was surfing quite a bit, but that was great. And that is the Zen. I mean, and it's just people don't get it unless they've taken up surfing. I mean, surfing is pretty awesome. I
think that explains a lot of his values. Like even that there was a whole scene back then, like those guys, Dick Dale and those guys, they're all going around on motorbikes and like just cool, like playing guitar. Like this is sort of the pre-hippie kind of.
That's the thing about Big Wednesday is it perfectly. If it might even be the only movie that describes that cultural shift between the post-beatnik lifestyle of the 60s of like almost this like American perfection into the hippie lifestyle of the late 60s, early 70s. Like when they're at the cafe and that they always went to and Jan Michael Vincent pours the Coca-Cola over the incense and he's like, get this shit out of my face. And he's like, hey man, hey brother, like be cool. And he's like, I'm not your brother. That was so good. There's really cool stuff in that. And Jerry that was the second movie Jerry Lopez obviously is in, Uncle Jerry.
You know him? Did you know him?
I met him. Yeah, I do know him. He's really cool. I think that those two movies are just really, really key to getting his philosophy and like the Zen anarchy definitely comes through.
Jerry Lopez's gods are the four winds, and the everlasting sky. But Crom laughs at his four winds.
Crom laughs at your four winds.
Strong in his mountain. I wanted to ask you about this because maybe this is bullshit. I don't know because I just read it from clips, right? And I think I sent it to you. There's a few clips of your dad. Like I know he's Jewish and everything, but talking about being a pagan or that he loves paganism, and he said Conan's a very pagan movie. And when he almost made that Northman thing, he says, "I've been waiting. This has been coming a long time. I am a practicing pagan." So do you know anything about
remember that phase? Yeah, he was a practicing pagan for a while. And then he got really Jewish, and then he went back to the pagan thing, and then he went back to the Jewish thing. It really depends on who he's married to. So you've seen The Big Lebowski, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, of course, yeah.
So you know Walter based on my dad. So that's probably the most accurate representation that's ever existed. Like that's like so accurate. It's like strange how accurate that portrayal is. But yeah, so he wavers between really hardcore Zionism and like telling people he's a pagan to just, I mean, you remember he's kind of like an early, like he would fit in a lot in these days. Like he'll say things to people just to like kind of fuck with them. Like, I mean, he's told me on many occasions that like, as long as how does he, so he wants to be buried on, not buried, he wants to be on a Viking funeral pyre on this specific
You're
lake.
gonna have to do this. You're gonna have to do this.
Okay, but this is, we're just getting started. So
okay.
the pyre goes out on the lake, and it's at this very specific lake that he liked at this shooting club that he lived near. And I was like, well, we're gonna have to ask the shooting club, because I don't know if they're gonna let me just start building like a raft and then a pyre, like, you know. So I think we're gonna need them to like, because they're gonna notice me doing this. And then he's like, okay, but it has to be that lake. And he's like, I want to be floated out on the Viking funeral pyre, surrounded by all of my mistresses and all of my guns. And I was like, no problem. I was like, no problem on the mistresses, but I'm replacing the guns with pieces of wood. And he was like, all right, fine.
So if you can organize that, I mean, that would.
Yeah, I'll let you know. You can come help. We can get like a group together to come build it or whatever. And then when I get mad at him, I tell him I'm gonna tie him up to it and send him out on there early. But
yeah,
I'll tell him to send his girlfriend out on there first just to see if it works.
See, this is the kind of people I was hoping to get out of you, because I know that he must be saying things like this. And I know to you it's a bit cynical, and he reverses what he says and this and that. But I mean, to me, it all makes sense. In a, I mean, I know he. They even say in the documentaries he sort of constructed his own character in a way, but you know he believes what he's saying. He doesn't really back down on the hearts or anything, I don't think.
No,
like you say,
he believes what he's saying right then. Like, sure.
He changes
but does he believe what he's saying 2 years later? I don't know. Like sometimes he does. I mean,
well, perhaps perhaps it's an understanding of the fact that you cannot know anything absolutely, and
yeah, I mean, and I'm fine with that. Like, I have a feeling I'm going to look back on interviews I've done this year and just be utterly horrified at some point. But like, I don't care right now. So I like, really, what is time when you're an anarchist? But yeah, I mean, the pagan phase was like. Yeah, there was a lot of press during the pagan phase. Like he did get to mention that a lot. I mean, he'd probably still say he's a pagan at heart.
Right. I mean, he is. I, you know, in a way, I believe he is. What about like even Rome? Well, how much involvement did he have in that Rome series? Because that was the last good. That was the last really good TV show I ever saw. Probably like series.
No, he conceived of that whole thing. I mean, he's been obsessed with Roman history. Actually, to be fair, you know, my oldest brother, was like of the right age. He was older than me, so he was kind of like more present during the writing of that or the conceiving of that show. But by the time it was out, it was really cool to see that, like, because, you know, that was one of the first times, like, that was a pre-Mad Men, pre-Sopranos, I think, HBO. It was one of those first times where the hour-long drama series really replaced movies as the place where you would go to see good content. And that was when HBO was cool. I think they canceled, because you could have written that show forever. I think he was prepared to have it go through the entire history of Rome, which you could have easily done. I mean, literally, you could have watched that show for like 7 more years. Like, it was so good. Oh, no. I try to watch it once, or I try to watch it once every 2 years, just because I see something new every time. It's so good. He's always been obsessed with Roman history. it's just an amazing. I mean, the characters are amazing. Like everything about it's fantastic.
So,
Like it's
so that in a way is his actual what do you call it? His final opus thing. His
in a
you think?
sense, yeah, and that makes sense too, because it's like a combination of the Genghis Khan story and ethos and heart, and the Roman history stuff. I think is really where a lot of his inspiration came from. I mean, the thing is about the, also don't forget, like, he got into movies by getting into Akira Kurosawa. So it's like he's like,
Yeah,
always
amazing.
wanted to do these big, very like heartfelt masculine movies that I just think were so much more complex than people give him credit for. But he's definitely having a resurgence now, which I really like. I'm glad that I got to see that.
It doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter what they say. There's no doubt that he was like amongst the very best ever in terms of his art. Like film itself is like a combination of all these other art. Yeah, I would say writing is the ultimate art because it's like the pure idea expressed and you like absorb someone else's thoughts like immediately kind of thing. But really, in a grander sense, film is the ultimate combination. You got writing, music, the visuals, everything. Yeah. So it's kind of like sound. Yeah. As he said, it was like being a general in a war. You had to like organize so many different things.
That's what he realized. So, I mean, it does tend to lead to strong personalities being at the helm of such things, or else they are failures. But it's important to have a good, strong leader on these types of projects.
Yeah. So as far as that goes, I mean, we may be entering a dark age now, and it may be like,
you think?
Well, I don't know, possibly. And if so, it'll be in a couple hundred years, if they're still able to view films, they will be able to see that your father is amongst the ranks of like, the eternal artists like Beethoven.
Yeah, we may have to. I suppose we may have to like. We're gonna have to crowdfund. Like, what do they do when they send stuff up to the moon? They like put it in gold. They like etch like a record in gold or something, so that the aliens can find it one day. I think we need to put the John Milius collection on the gold in the time capsule. Can you believe the Criterion collection hasn't even released a Milius collection yet?
I can believe it for political reasons. Yeah, I can entirely believe it.
They're also just like the best movies. Like, how could you not do that? Like, it's so dumb. I just
it's
so
influential. Yeah, but
that's the thing. So well, like
we're living off a reverse archetype of the culture he created with his pals at that time. Like that was so influential. Him and Lucas and people like that made such an impact that like it's when like something really huge happens, and then afterwards you kind of take it for granted. And people think, oh, well, it's like it becomes obvious, and they can't appreciate that someone had to invent this. It's because it's everywhere, because it becomes so popular that it's like.
Well, I mean, yeah, even stuff like Game of Thrones. They're for sure. Conan was the first movie that took the genre of fantasy, if you want to call it that, seriously, and treated it like you were watching a historical documentary about like Vikings or something. Like or like a historical retelling or whatever. There was absolutely would be no Game of Thrones or any of that kind of stuff if it wasn't for Conan. I mean, that was really the first one that did that, which is why people took it so seriously. And I mean, to be fair, like that's kind of what Lucas was doing at the same time, a bit earlier, but they all kind of overlap because, they were, you got to remember, these guys were writing this stuff and working on this stuff from film school onwards. Like they had these ideas like years before they executed them. I mean, this stuff took a long time. That's sort of what Lucas had done with the space movie, that it was taking it more seriously. My preference is, as far as space movies go, is Alien, as everyone knows, which was only made a couple years after Star Wars, but I think looks about 1 million times more sophisticated and is just like a beautiful art film. But I knew the production designer because he was the production designer on Conan. And he was always hanging out with my dad, and we had a lot of his paintings in our house, and they impacted
Was
me.
Frisetta involved in Conan or no?
No, that was Ron Cobb,
All right.
Australian guy. I don't know, but he was, yeah, Ron Cobb was most certainly involved in Conan as well. I think.
Right.
I better be right about that. I think so. I'm pretty sure he was. That's why he was involved. But he was like involved on a lot of my dad's movies. And I mean, then you got Basil Polidorus. That was the cool thing. Recently at the Disney concert hall, they did a 40th anniversary Basil Polidorus, Conan the Barbarian performance, which is really awesome because you absolutely wouldn't have that movie without Basil Polidorus. I mean, it was incredible.
That was the most amazing soundtrack to just about any movie. I don't know where that like how did your father know that guy? Do you know?
They went to USC together, and Basil was actually studying to be a director.
Oh shit, was he? Right, okay. And did he make any films or?
Yeah, he did. I thought for a second he made there's this one friend of my dad's actually who made this student film that my dad stars in that I finally got to see in the last 5 years. That's like really totally insane. They've got clips of it in that Apocalypse Now show I just watched that I told you about. But wait, what is it called? I know the guy. I'll get a copy of it up on YouTube at some point because I'm sure he wouldn't mind. But it's really funny. My dad plays this, like, I think he's like an assassin, but he's also like a limo driver. I don't know. Anyway, these guys, they were having a good time. I mean, USC is like the coolest like college experience you can have. But yeah, it was he definitely was there with the right guys.
And what's this business about your dad inventing the MMA thing?
Oh, he created it with the Gracie family.
So it was him. So it was inspired by the pit fighting scene from Conan, obviously.
No, he was the Octagon was inspired by the pit fighting scene, and he was hanging out with the Gracies and doing training in Beverly Hills. And then my brother started practicing, and he was doing fights and training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then they got together and they were like, how do we prove that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is like the ultimate martial art? And then they created MMA and UFC, and they produced UFC like 1 through 5 or something, and then managed to sell it for no money. And then now it's a sport that's bigger than baseball. So
right,
that was cool.
That's tragic. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. But still, I mean,
it's fine. I hate money. I mean, I wish it's great. I love that story.
Well, what can you do when you're the daughter of such a
man?
I
mean, you're fine. All right, that happened. A couple other really,
people who make and retain money like that are usually awful, cheesy, horrible people, right? The real bean counter type of people. So
yeah,
your dad was not like that.
That would really suck. I'd hate to have billions and billions of dollars. That would be so shitty.
Well, you're not doing too bad. You've got a music or a movie production company. I mean, you must. And what about Trump? Can you not ask Trump for some money? Say, Mr. Trump. Okay.
You know what's weird? Like, I think the reason that I like Trump and that I was like able to like withstand the rises and the valleys and the mountains and the falls and all that, because my dad's like somewhat like that. Like, they both have like 2 weaknesses, which are men in uniform, because they both kind of wish they were in the army, and they have great reverence for the military and the the services. So like, my dad would be like, what do you mean McMaster's bad? And Trump would be like, what do you mean McMaster's bad? And then they also have a fondness for like hot chicks on Fox. So like,
well, who doesn't? I mean, who doesn't? You can't blame.
Yeah, I mean, these are the 2 people that can say anything to either of those guys and get whatever they want.
Okay. I would have thought your dad, if your dad was in his prime, I think he'd be a little bit past all of that still. I mean, I could be wrong. You know him better than me. I shouldn't dare to say what your dad. Pardon me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, it's true. You know, he's way older now, and then like the stroke thing was like a bit of a curveball because he did have the stroke. I don't know, like 12 years ago. I don't even know. Like it was over 10 years ago at this point. So like he could have still been writing for sure up until this point because like he definitely has the capacity to do that. But I think he's more of like a I think that's like the biggest sort of shame of it all is that like he could have at least still been writing for stuff, and I think he would have had more opportunities because finally people really kind of got that he was like this really, really, really special talent that wasn't going to be here forever and that like needed to be like, no matter what your politics were, like recognized. So I think that's kind of one of the shames of it. But you know,
you must keep in mind, and it should be enough that he created the late culture of the 20th century with these other guys. But like he was instrumental, and everything they do now is like a reverse of that. People now are like the anti-Conan, anti-Jeremiah Johnson. They do not like
which means invention is going to come back though.
Well, one would hope. One would hope.
Yeah.
But currently, everything they do is like they're reacting against that. Still, they're reacting against those values somehow. I mean, it all got really weird and stupid. And if Spengler's right, there's nothing. As I said, nothing can be done. But you would think and hope that something could be done. But like.
Wait, shit, I lost your audio. Hold on. Uh-oh.
No, it fucking does that every single time. Look, I'm just a guy in his work shed, for God's sake.
No, you've definitely got a heck of a setup there. That's
yeah.
I feel like kind of a chump just in like a green office. Like I'm like, okay, like
well, you need some gear.
I haven't even hung my Frisettas yet. Like I'm like kind of like losing it.
You need the Valeria Valkyr gear, the when she's all shiny.
Valkyrie gear? Yeah, somebody posted that on Twitter the other day and they were like, does this still exist? And I was like, no, because I'd be wearing it right now. Like
you should. Also excellent in that show is she and I'm not saying this in reference to you at all. I mean, I don't mean to be rude or anything, but
it's cool.
Well, hilarious. Just in all the movies in the 80s, something that would not again happen now. At some point, the lead actress would get topless. It was just like a thing.
Oh yeah, 100% has to happen for sure.
It'd just be so hilarious. And you watch it now, and it's like, oh yeah, there's the topless scene. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, wait, when does Valeria actually get topless in Conan, or is it just the other
when they're making love in the nest thing, whatever the fuck it is?
Oh yeah. When okay, wait. The best part. So I'm sure you've heard the mashup of the director's commentary.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's the best thing ever. That is.
That's the actual best thing ever. Like, and then when Arnold's going, and this is when he has to listen to the problems of the women, like. All of the women. Then he's sitting there and he's like, I must listen to the women's talking now.
Yeah.
It's so rad. And then actually that, you know what? Whenever I'm in a shitty mood, like there's nothing better than like that like director's commentary. Or if you really want to get into it, just watch the whole director's commentary. Or that one mashup that some genius in the early days of YouTube did that has it as like a video game. And it is like the most sophisticated sense of humor I've like ever seen. It's just brilliant where it's like questions. And it's Arnold going like, so this is the part now where he hits me in the head, or so what's happening in this scene? And like, it's like basically like Arnold can't remember like the plot of the movie, and my dad is like, no. What they're doing is this. Like they're doing
his disinterest, is hilarious.
And then, like, there's the mashup of my dad saying the word Valkyrie like 80 million times, which is like the funniest thing. Like that is amazing. That there's got to be like a category for like great directors commentaries, and like that has to be number one.
See, that's the kind of incidental thing that happens with people like this who are just genuine and eccentric, right? That is excellent. And like the average idiot doesn't appreciate shit like that. They think, oh, it's goofy or whatever, or But like that's the pure gold right there. I remember the scene where I remember listening to that, and the scene where Arnold's doing the samurai sword training.
Yeah.
And the master guy kicks the other guy in the nuts. And Arnold just fucking starts breaking his ass, laughing at like he's just like, oh, he really got it there. And he laughs so hard.
It's the funniest thing you've ever seen. It's just like the stupidest physical humor, and like Arnold's like dying laughing, and you're like, the governor of California, everyone.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, it's really good.
That is good. Well, Amanda, what do you think?
I'm super glad I got to do this with you. I'm so sorry that I was delayed for you and your audience, who are my people. Maybe I can come back sometime and.
Oh, absolutely! I mean, Jesus Christ! I mean, you're the. I mean, I'm the nobody in his work shed. You're the.
No, I'm digging the work shed. The work shed's very cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, if anytime, I'm obviously, it's up to you entirely. And
I would be happy.
Thanks very much for doing that. I mean, that shows you've got your father's values right there. That you would come on some little guys podcast.
Dude, of course, no. Like anybody who loves Conan, like gets it. Like if you're, like it's. I mean, there's not that many of us. Like I was raised by it. So were you. Like
there's a lot of like, young people on the internet. I mean, that's all they know about your father is Conan, and I rarely hear anything negative about it. Like.
That is awesome. Yeah, and then you get like the BAP crowd, which is great. Right. I had to explain that to somebody the other day. It was like trying to explain landing on the moon to like, you're like, okay, well, there's this guy named like it's like really hard to explain. It was just amazing. But yeah, we're I don't know. We got to get like a screening together of Conan somewhere. And like, I guess, one cool thing I heard, I'm going to end you with this one. So Sandal, who plays Valeria, accompanied my dad onto the stage for the Basil Polidoris event, which was pretty cool. So apparently, as my dad says in the Conan commentary, she looks great. But apparently she still dances and she's still doing her thing. So I just think that's so cool. And yeah, I mean the truly last thing I'll leave you with, which is like a bit of a gripe of my own, which is that it's a little annoying because like I do have one script that I kind of co-drafted or like noted up with my dad, which was basically related to Valeria. But the problem is, most people would be like, oh yeah, I want to see that. That sounds so cool. You're like, yeah, tell Warner Brothers. Like, it's the same problem. Like, I wish I hadn't let my creative, even the word
Conan, they'll shy away from. It's like, it's not.
So, but I mean, certainly
you'd have to raise independent money. You'd have to sell a shitload of heroin or something. We have to get
get Arnold on board and people. But I mean, if they'll probably do something like that, but they'll probably do it in a stupid way. Whereas like ours would have been like absolutely awesome.
Yeah,
it would have been really, really, really cool. So
that's true.
Anyway,
we must live through this tragedy, Amanda. We must live through this tragedy. There's nothing we can do but
we must survive to fight another day.
Exactly. And thank you so much for talking to me. And
thank you.
I feel very honored. And like I said, your dad is a legend for all times.
Thank you so much. Sorry to hold us up at the beginning, and then I'm so glad I got to join you. And like I said, next time we've got some news of any sort, I'm coming back. Okay.
Well, thanks very much.
Okay.
Hopefully, I'll send you my books as well.
Yeah. Yes. And, send me those, and then I'll get a hold of the secret scripts for you.
Yes. Oh God. Oh.
Promise.
Yes. Thanks very much. All right. Thanks.
Okay. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.